In spite of the availability of perfect information on almost everything, people will not seek it out for brands or from organisations either they've never heard of or that no one else likes or recommends. Brands and organisations need to have shared meaning to have value online, and that can only be established in public media. Consumption in the silo of the self is not the right model. Shared experiences and affiliated behaviour are a vital part of what it is to be human. So don't confuse the possible with the popular. In any case, no new medium has completely displaced another. Books, newspapers, radio, cinema, television all have enlarged the menu and shifted the balance. Media is an ecology, and adaptation is what happens. That effectively was my thesis in the height of the first dot-com boom, which it was being overheated, overreacted to, and people weren't using a humanistic model based on what we knew at the time, which I hasten to add. It was really great fun to say all that because it was completely not what the popular view was. And it was, of course, music to the ears of the old media barons. And I always think that, I know he wasn't in the audience, Murdoch wasn't in the audience, but lots of his people were, and I wondered if it had anything to do with supporting his conviction that he shouldn't get involved in it at that time. I'm sure it didn't at all, but that's what I say to myself. In fact, one of the reasons for my conviction at the time was that I had seen it all before. I had seen before, quite close up, the triumph of the human model over the technocratic one, which leads me to my story from the first wave, which is when I was really quite young, early 20s. I was lucky enough to work for an agency in California called Chiat Day in San Francisco on the small team that helped Steve Jobs launch the Macintosh in 1984. I worked there from 83 to 87, and the agency pretty much had a monopoly on the key companies driving that first wave revolution. As well as Apple on our client list, we had Intel, we worked with Andy Grove, Lotus Notes, Mitch Kapor, and later we had Atari, a couple of years later, which is a whole different story, the birth of the games industry with Atari. We worked in or visited a secret facility slightly off the Apple campus, which housed the Mac development team. We had long meetings in the Peppermill restaurant, and we had many a late night with pizza with Steve. Steve's driving vision behind the Mac, as everyone knows, was the democratization of computer technology, the liberation of locked-up mainframe computing power from the hands of the few and its distribution to the many. It's hard to imagine now, but the phrase personal computer was a new one, and it still carried the intrinsic shock of the oxymoron. His conviction was that the most sophisticated technology was the most invisible, that computers should make themselves more human, not the reverse, that simplicity and ease of use would be transformational. The WYSIWYG interface and the point-and-click commands were radical at the time, and the computer looked like an upturned shoebox, if you remember. I had number 132 off the production line when they automated production the following year, and I really wish I'd kept it now for eBay, or better for Damien Hirst to encrust it with diamonds or something. It would have been very valuable. Anyway, other than his team of developers, his own team, the agency was the single most important partner for Steve during all of this process. It was a very intimate relationship that the two companies had. He understood the importance of communication, that it had to match his vision and ambition for the Mac, which was nothing short of profound sociological change. And he knew, after a number of false starts, that he would only have one shot at it. We did a fantastic campaign for the launch, which ran for 2 years. In its time, it was multimedia, TV, print, press, radio. That was multimedia in those days, outdoor, we painted some walls. And the idea was expressed prosaically as Macintosh for the computer for the rest of us. And we made one commercial that became very famous. It only ran once, which really has defined the Apple brand, certainly in America to this day, the 1984 ad. And amazingly, the same agency and the same creative director did that ad as is currently doing the Apple ads and did the Think Different campaign that revitalized the company when Steve Jobs returned in the late 90s. The launch of the Mac and the way it was launched created a viral evangelical cohort that could only ever be Mac people. One of the lines from our ads was, "Soon there will be two kinds of people, those who use computers and those who use Macintosh." Kevin Costner, an unknown Kevin Costner, delivered those in a really fantastic way in one of our ads. For better or worse, that was a wonderfully prophetic line. But Steve's humanistic vision for technology and his passion for pursuing it, I make no claims for him as a philanthropist, but he is definitely a humanist when it comes to technology, had triumphed. and not just for Apple, but for the whole idea of personal computing, which has so much resonance and so many parallels now. And that experience certainly infected me with a passion for what technology could do for people and what people could do with technology. And that passion is being reawakened now with the third wave. I remember at the time the web was undreamed of, even at that time. But does my curmudgeon's manifesto from the second wave, or the first dot-com boom, does it still stand against this new world that we're now living in? I would have to say that it doesn't at all. Web 2, and I know people here probably hate that word, and it's just a way of summarising, let's say it's a broad and loose shorthand for a collection of technology features, functions and characteristics, but that really does change everything. Because of all the reasons you know, our ability to share and exchange information and ideas with each other and to create our own networks, a strong viral effect effectively mimics the experience of mass media in that awareness and appreciation is widely and quickly shared. So the effects driven by broadband start to mimic the effects of broadcast with some added extras. The viral effect is arguably even more valuable because it is effectively unmediated, so we believe it comes to us with our name on it from someone who thinks we'll like it. It is in fact the effect that all good communicators have always sought in the real world, ideas that get talked about and create word of mouth. And even though it's worth pointing out that a lot of what's been shared is still professionally created material, the second big change is the breakdown of the producer-consumer relationship and the rise of user-generated content. I think I'll miss out this bit because you know all of that all so well. Interesting thing I think about the way the web is being used now is this trend, obviously, towards becoming where we codify, experiment with and display our identity. Not as the state sees it in terms of passport, driver's license and national insurance number, or even as Tesco might want to see it in terms of our club card number and what kind of toilet roll and dog food we want to buy, but in how we see it. So we are now much more in control of our identity. We can't be so easily cast into niches and kind of numbers and ciphers the way institutions and brands might want us to be. I often think, in fact, what's happening now is that digital convergence is effectively turning consumers, that word that's been applied to us for the last 50 years, turning us, consumers, back into people. Which is not to say that we are not buying and choosing and using just as much, but that this is now seamless with our behaviour as citizens, social beings, and in a way as content producers and creators. We express and display almost all our choices digitally, although we still may experience them physically. So we are people first now, and companies, brands and institutions will have to see us as people first. Even though they can address us in the niche, they will have to see us in the round, and we can control that. And we have the power to control that. So I think in a way where we are now with technology is the fulfillment of the humanistic agenda for technology. And the impact for brands, I think I'll cut this short too for time, is that I also think brands, seeing that people are turned back into people, brands now want to be people, which is, you know, you'll have lots of clients asking to do MySpace pages and Second Life presences and all of this. And whether or not that works still very much remains to be seen, and it's the subject of another discussion, I think. I never thought I'd be able to quote Winston Churchill in a speech about technology, but in fact he said once that the empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. But will this empire of the mind be caring, sharing and meritocratic, or will it be factionalised, narcissistic and nihilistic? I believe at the margins it will of course be the latter, but I think that there are things we will lose also. But in the main it will be the former, I believe, because I think people are essentially good, essentially social, essentially creative, and in aggregate, essentially pro-social. I also believe that online relationships are real and not ersatz, and that anonymity often, ironically, fosters authenticity. So I believe that the power of the web for good is immense, and I also believe that now is the time for that power to be harnessed for major pro-social and creative initiatives that use all of our expressive, creative, and social instincts. I think, I was trying to cut it short, I think that, just to summarise that last piece, really, I think that the web can be where the wisdom of crowds meets the kindness of strangers. But whatever it is, it will be shaped by what makes us human, for better or worse. Thank you very much.